Dignity Matters.
Hello, and thank you for joining me today. My name is Bali Lerner. I'm your host for today, and I'm the host of Unmasked, Unfiltered, and Unapologetic on HMTV. I am really excited to introduce our incredible guest, Sabrina Soffer. Hello, Sabrina. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here today. We are so grateful that you came in from DC to join us for the screening of the movie Blind Spot, which you have an active role in. Mm-hmm. And I know it's been, we actually had Lenny Gould, the executive producer, here yesterday, and we had a great conversation with him. We're excited for tonight's screening and also for the follow-up panel, which you will be part of. So welcome.
Thank you.
Sabrina, for those of members of our listeners that may not be fully aware of your background, can you share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I just graduated from George Washington University in May. Thank you. And at George Washington, I was the president of Chabad during my senior year. And prior to that, I was the vice president, and I served on the board my first year. So I was very involved with Jewish life from the very beginning. And I was also in charge of the Antisemitism task force that was actually launched before October 7th. And it was short-lived, and I can get into the story about it later on in the conversation. But this was a charge that I had a lot of hope in. And it has a lot of important lessons that I think we can take away from. And before that, my family has a very strong Jewish background. My mom was born in Dagestan, so it's like the Southern Caucasus, but formerly part of the Soviet Union. Her family moved to Israel when she was 6 years old, and she grew up in Israel, and then she moved to New York, and then to San Diego. And my dad's family is originally from Egypt. And they were my dad's family before my dad was born. They moved or fled actually to Israel in the 1950s because of the anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist persecution there. And my dad was born in Israel, grew up there until he was 7, moved to Mexico City, grew up in Mexico City, and then moved to California.
Wow.
So very diverse background.
We need more than 1 or 2 podcasts to get into your family history, but all right,
it's crazy.
Let's dive into it a little bit. Okay, go ahead.
Sure.
Sorry.
Well, what I was going to add is that when I got to college with this diverse background, I thought that I would be accepted into all the progressive spaces where diversity was, I guess, the highest virtue. And I thought that sharing about my Jewish background, about my Egyptian roots, and the Kafkazi side and the Mexican side, would really make for great discussion. But it became apparent that just the fact that I was an Israeli in part, alongside all those other things, it just didn't seem like, now in retrospect, looking back, right, that I would be accepted like everybody else because of that one facet of my identity. And I had no idea that
Sabrina,
would be the case.
did you start feeling that, early on when you got to GW, how soon when you got to campus, you clearly went there with an open mind, excited. I have a daughter your age, and I know it's such an exciting time, and you have such aspirations and hopes for the future. So when you got there, how soon did you feel that? Because a lot of people, seem to say, oh, since October 7th. But the truth is, and what we discussed in the Blind Spot, in the panel, and what the Blind Spot covers is, it was way before. The anti-Semitism was there way before. Mm-hmm. Just a lot more came out at post-October 7th. People started to feel like it was acceptable to come out publicly. So tell me, I'm just curious, did you start feeling it right away, or, was it after 10/7, or you were there for a while?
Yeah, so to answer your question, yes, it was long before October 7th, and I was actually, I guess, fighting the fight, so to speak, way before as well. And I started to feel this sort of ostracism, strange feeling from my peers. Very strange things were said in the classroom, and I really didn't know what this animus was. I didn't understand it, but I was already feeling the effects. Just to give you an example, there was a conversation that we had in class where one of the students said, the Holocaust is a lot more sensitized in schools than slavery is because Jews are white. So now it's you see how the Jews are white, I guess, trope, if you want to call it that, gets weaponized against us today. And I didn't really know at the time during my freshman year, this was, I think, the spring of 2022 that this happened. I was like, okay, this is a little bit of a weird comment, but we'll go along with it. And I apologized to her for being offensive in whatever way I offended her. But in reality, I think she'd learned this notion that Jews are white and that the Holocaust is more sensitized in schools than slavery, because she either saw it on social media, or what I would say is more pervasive is what gets to social media is from respectable faculty members. And I mean, there's so many other things that happened before October 7th on campus as well that really ignited my passion to start speaking up about these things, one of which was a small Torah scroll that was desecrated inside a fraternity house on campus. Mezuzot were ripped from doorposts and desecrated. There were Intifada protests already, and I really didn't understand what this was. And I would eventually go to the Institute for Middle East Studies events at George Washington, because that was really my interest. I was leaning toward an international politics major with a focus in the Middle East, and I started going to their events, and I would see the rhetoric in those events literally mirroring what the students were chanting in the protests. So
wow, I feel so terrible that this was basically the beginning, and pretty much went through probably your whole 4 years at school. That must have been very, very hard, to go into GW with such high hopes and a bright future. And so let me just backtrack for a moment. Mm-hmm. So you didn't really feel any of this growing up up until you went to college. Like you had a normal upbringing, and you just assumed going into GW you would be accepted for your diversity.
Absolutely. Yeah, I did not face any of these issues. I mean, I think the only thing I faced in 7th grade, there was a kid who made a Holocaust joke in school, and I said, if you ever say that again, I'll slap you in the face. And of course, it's just like child's play, right? But I was very taken aback at the comment he made. But real anti-Semitism, I thought was obsolete. I really didn't think that it would reemerge in any way. And I actually thought that because Israel is the beacon of social justice and democracy in the Middle East, everything was good now, right? We had the Holocaust. We learned our lesson. The Holocaust is taught in the United States and in the West, mostly everywhere. So we're good. No problem. So to answer your question, I really didn't expect any of this at all.
I think that's a shocking part of it, is that I think many of us felt that, we were relatively safe. I know here at the Holocaust and Moral Intolerance Center, we teach students and adults about being upstanders. Yeah. We teach them about, what it means when hate goes unchecked. When we use the lessons through the lessons of the Holocaust to teach people and teach children and adults alike to what it means to be an upstander, what it means to have the power to do good, to shed light in darkness. We discuss atrocities that have occurred, not only in the Holocaust, but since, and how we need to learn our lesson. But I think for many years as well, we also felt that, people kind of understood the beauty of Judaism, the beauty of Israel, the history of the Jews, how they were scapegoated, what led for, thousands of years before the Holocaust, and how all these atrocities that led up to the Holocaust. We thought we were in a better place. We thought people understood all this, like you did as well. So I understand what a shock it must have been to you, and I am sorry that you had that experience. It seems like your college life, to some extent, was ripped away from you because you took on this fight, which we're very grateful for, by the way. So, and interesting, I really do appreciate, and I think what's important here is we do speak at the center about, the caricatures, for example, that came out leading up to the Holocaust, and again, way before. And unfortunately, those have reemerged, right? Yeah. And you're labeled as a white, right? But meanwhile, your background says something completely different. So it just shows how ill-informed people are. So moving right along, I'm just curious. I was in D.C. for the march. I don't remember I think it was in November, was that it? After 10/7. And do you remember approximately how many people were there that day?
I think it was some 300,000.
Right.
That's what they said.
Yeah, it was an incredible day. Obviously, we were there for the worst reason. But in a way, we were there also, it was beautiful in the sense that the community really came together. Jews and non-Jews came to fight for justice and to fight for the hostages. And it was an amazing day because I remember speaking to some of the security as we were leaving and as we were coming in, and there were so many people gathered, and they said they never could have imagined so many people would gather in one place and it'd be so peaceful. And I think that says a lot about our people and what we stand for. And I remember hearing you speak that day and thinking to myself, wow, you know, you were probably 20, 21 at the time, and I was blown away by anyone that could stand up and speak in front of this massive crowd, and you were there that day. So can you share a little bit about your experience leading up to and during that?
Sure. So it was, of course, I would say for that scale of an event, kind of a last-minute event. I didn't really expect that this would happen. And funny enough, when I heard about it initially, my dad called me and he goes, if you can speak at this event, it would be amazing.
Wow.
And I said, there's no way. You know, it's going to be Congress people and all these high caliber officials. And, you know, there's no way that a student like me is going to speak. So he said, try. So I asked a rabbi and some people I knew. I was like, is there any way? Are they going to have student speakers? If so, you know, it'd be really cool to have this opportunity, and it would be, you know, the highest honor. And sure enough, I was given the opportunity to do so. And the feeling of it was, I think the first line of what I said in that speech was, if you want to save the world, go home and love your family. And I think that that's really what that event stood for me, because we always talk about the Jewish people, and frankly, the people who support the Jewish people as our brothers and sisters, as our family. Like everybody in Israel is mishpacha. So it really just felt like everybody coming together to support not only Israel and the Jewish people, and to, I guess, have this sorrow for what happened over October 7th, but also to say we're here for moral values and humanity itself. Because I think what happened after October 7th, right, the October 8th phenomenon, is that you saw moral values and humanity basically die. Like with these protests on the street cheering for the murder of innocent civilians, babies and mothers, Holocaust survivors even, and entire families. And you question, how did this happen? And where are our morals today in the West? Where have we gone? And I think this march was the antithesis of that. And I think we should have more public presence like this in order to make the statement that we will not let humanity die. We will not let these moral values die. And that's really what it represented for me.
It's so beautifully said. I'm getting quite emotional because I think I wonder every day, you know, what has happened to us as a people? How have we gotten to this point? And how has such cruelty come to the surface? And how is it, it seems like in every corner of the world right now.
Yeah.
But I do try and remind myself that every day, that there are lots of people that do love their family, that do love their neighbors, that want to live in peace. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, some people that have gone astray from that, that are buying into all of this hype on social media, I do think that, unfortunately, their voices sometimes are the loudest, but there are so many people that feel the way that we do.
Yeah, and I would also say that something with Holocaust education that my mom always emphasized. So and I'll give you a little bit of my story here as well with, before college. So for my bat mitzvah, even though I had no family who perished in the Holocaust, thank God, my parents still made it an imperative for me to visit Yad Vashem before my bat mitzvah, because to learn about our past was an obligation to maturity, right? So I was very resistant toward it at first. I was afraid, I think, at 12 years old. But I went and I left the museum asking all these questions that I couldn't stop asking. And one of the most prominent questions that really kept racing through my mind was, how did the world remain silent? But at Yad Vashem, what they have at the end is like the garden for the righteous of the nations. And my mom always tells me is that Holocaust education should also focus on the people who stood up. not only the people who stayed silent, but people like Jan Karski and Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Oskar Schindler, right? These people who really should be the role models for the future. So I think that with that education together with the way I was raised and the moral values that my family imparted to me, learning the Holocaust in this light and having these conversations with my family about Holocaust education and really seeing Israel as another embodiment of standing up for yourself, right? Because that's the Jewish people having an army, being able to defend themselves, supported, of course, by the righteous around the world, which now we see we have tons of Christian support. Obviously, we have some Christians who aren't supporting us, but a lot of evangelical support, which I'm so grateful for. That's enough. You know, we have to take these into account as well. So it's not that everything is bad, right? I think we also have to look at the glimmers of positivity and use that to propel us forward as well.
Your parents sound incredible, clearly.
They are.
Yeah, they sound wonderful. And when, you know, it brings me back to on October 7th, is very little that can shake me up. And October 7th, I think like most of us, I felt broken. And I, for the first time, felt as, you know, and I lived through 9/11. I was a couple of blocks away from 9/11, running from the falling towers. You know, it's the same terror, the same evil on 9/11. It's the same exact enemy that we're fighting that we're combating today. And even then, I was still able to catch on to some hope because all around me, New Yorkers crowded around and said no to terror. Right. So it was a very different feeling. On October 7th, I remember calling my mother. So as old as you are, your mother is always your mother, right?
Yes.
So your father is your father. So I remember calling my mother and saying to her, I don't know, I don't know as a people how we will get past this. Yeah. And feeling such despair. And she said to me, look at what you do every day. Look at the Holocaust survivors. Look at how so many of them that survived lived such long lives, such full lives, what they've accomplished. They've extended, they've grown families, they've taught, they've chosen love, and they've gotten through it. Yep. She said, we will get through this, and it'll be hard, and it will take time, but we will, and I'm slowly realizing that, yes, we will get through it. It's every day is difficult, but we will get through it. So a lot of lessons in there, unfortunately. Do you remember where you were when you heard the news about 10/7? Yeah.
I remember waking up, actually, and I get a text from my friend who was in Israel on WhatsApp. And I didn't have, I couldn't see the text unless I unlocked my phone. And there appears there a photo of his friend who was a soldier who was murdered on October 7th. And he said, can you please post this picture for me? And I didn't understand the news. What happened? Why did his friend die? And then I went through all, the Wall Street Journal and such, and I saw what happened, and I finally understood. And of course, I posted the photo of his friend, and right away, actually, of course, talking to my parents, my family that's in Israel, asking all of them if they were okay. We were all in complete shock. But I knew what was going to happen. And I knew that this whole story would get turned on its head based on what was happening on campus before October 7th.
Right.
So right away, I mobilized and I said, number one, I'm going to write an op-ed to publish in the student newspaper to say what happened. These are the facts. You can't stray away from the facts. And you'll never be able to justify what was done by Hamas. So I did...
That's incredible that you had that. I mean, sadly, you had that vision because of what you were experiencing.
Exactly. And I knew what was going to happen on the campus level. So that was really the first thing I did, was plan to write this op-ed. And secondly, I knew that we had to do something public. So a few friends of mine from other schools in the DC area with some friends on campus, we put a group chat together with the help of Students Supporting Israel and a few other Jewish organizations in the area. We came together on the National Mall on October 8th, and we held a rally there in support of Israel. And of course, it was a lot of tears because it was just one day after. It wasn't with the same strength of the one in November, but this one was
still
more
filled with sadness.
But also we raised the Israeli flag, and we sang Am Yisrael Chai, and it was just something for everybody to come together. And I'm glad that we did that. And of course we had smaller rallies on campus after October 7th, but I would say nothing compared to what the other side did across campuses in the United States, which is, unfortunately, a brilliant strategy, what they've done. The whole strategy of, I guess, the Muslim Brotherhood influencing, the SJPs and, of course, the Faculty Justice for Palestine, which is the most notorious, I would say. But that it's a really brilliant way of indoctrinating people and mobilizing them toward a cause. And I think that on the pro-Israel side, we haven't stepped up to the plate enough to organize ourselves. I wouldn't want to say in a similar way, but in a truly authentic and robust way to ensure that Jewish students are standing up as courageously, as boldly with the facts. So
I agree with you. I think that's something that we're struggling with as a people. I think as a people, and this is just my opinion, I think because generally we don't like to be pitied, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Jewish people in history, even through after the Holocaust, a lot of the survivors didn't even want to speak about their experience. They said, okay, I'm here, maybe, mostly a lot of them here without the rest of their family, and they just found a way to move forward and survive and go on. And I think that we've always been in everybody else's corner, making sure that no one else gets treated the way we were treated.
Right.
And we're great at speaking up for others. And I think that this is such a shift in what's needed. We need to stand up for ourselves, as you said, and I believe that's the bottom line. We need to stand up for ourselves right now. And we need, in order, actually Lenny was saying this yesterday on our podcast, in order for us to expect others to stand up with us, we need to stand up for ourselves.
Yeah, people need to look at us as the inspiration that they can follow, because it's hard to be the first one to say something.
And unfortunately, the other side, they keep spreading their message of hate,
right?
Propaganda, flat out lies, and it doesn't seem to matter what's true or what's not true.
Right.
If you repeat it often enough, it starts to become the truth. So I think they've become so mobilized and so organized, and unfortunately they've been very successful. Like
yeah, and
said.
I think that also people aren't taking this threat seriously enough, even amongst Jews. I think if you look back to the 1930s, there's a novel by Stefan Zweig. He was a Viennese intellectual who sadly in 1942 committed suicide just before the atrocities of the Holocaust really started picking up. But he writes in his book that leading up to the Anschluss, where Hitler just walked into Vienna with no problem, the intellectuals of the time laughed at Hitler's speeches, at his writings. And he says that the writing was on the wall, that the foundation of what was happening had been just eroding long before. And for us not to see the writing on the wall, I mean, this process of demonizing Israel, demonizing the Jewish people once again, has been on the wall for 20 years, even longer. So I think that turning a blind eye, now having all this exposed, and this phenomenon of October 8th Jews is great, but I think we've missed a whole chunk in the middle to really understand what has been happening, and we haven't taken this seriously enough, and we have to stop laughing and start acting.
Right.
So
I agree.
Yeah.
And the truth is that this is about democracy.
Yeah.
This is about our Western values being ripped away. I mean, when you see, and I refer again to the march that we had back in November 2023, and there were American flags and Israeli flags, and there was singing and there was hope. And then when you look at the other side,
absolutely,
and what do? You see American and Israeli flags being burned. You see people hiding their faces. Why are you hiding your face? If you believe in what you stand up for, there's no reason to hide your face, right?
Right.
People just yelling, screaming, attacking, and such visceral everywhere. But I do think that we are starting to get a bit more organized. I do think that more and more people, Americans, are starting to realize that this is a real enemy.
Absolutely.
This is a real common enemy and a real threat. So I guess I would say, as someone who's recently graduated, and clearly you know that the average student is not necessarily going to do what you're doing right now, but what can they do on the smallest level, to do their part in helping the world today?
It's a good question. I think there are many ways that people can help, and not everything has to be public and front-facing and bold and daunting. I think that every Jewish student who comes to college and takes part in their Chabad or Hillel and in their Jewish community and doesn't shy away from wearing a Jewish star on campus, and when they're in class and a professor says something either out of ignorance or deliberate offense to the Jewish people and trying to erase our history, that student should say something. Because when you remain complacent, that's when the biggest threat looms. Because everybody else sitting there in that classroom is going to believe in what the professor says. And that's the unfortunate reality, that these professors are now weaponizing their platform to politicize. And perhaps not always, but sometimes the frameworks through which they're teaching lends to Jews are white, and then Jews are white gets mixed with the anti-Israel protests. So if you're ignorant and misguided, perhaps, you're going to go join them. And it's the responsibility of every Jewish person to speak up in those situations.
I agree, because, you know, any little bit of the wrong message, by not saying anything, basically you're letting everyone believe that it's accurate.
Totally.
So whether it's a professor, whether it's someone, you know, at a table next to you having lunch, whatever it is, that we have an opportunity to educate others with the facts. And you don't need to be a historian.
Right.
But, you know the basics about your identity, know the basics about your history, about the Jewish people, about Israel, enough so that you can speak to others about it. And I think that's important too, is if you don't know, reach out to our center, reach out to, to you. Like, there's so many people out there that are willing to help. I think another important, something else that you touched on, and I'd like to speak, I know you can't really share so much of the details about your lawsuit right now, but I think what is really important, and we actually heard Shabbos Kestenbaum, who has done many events with us, and he's fantastic. He also said yesterday, find someone to help. There are so many people out there today, and there are so many resources out there that if you're a student or an adult, if something is happening, if you hear something, whether it was done to you or you see something, there are so many people today that are willing to help you take action.
Absolutely. Yeah, right. I was going to say, I'll never be afraid, even if you are a Jewish student and you feel marginalized or ostracized. There are communities and there are people who are available to help you. And I think Shabbos is absolutely right in bringing that point forward. And something else that I would say is you don't have to speak up right away, because that might be daunting if you're, a freshman or a sophomore. But absolutely record the incident. All the facts should be written down. Emails should be sent to the university administration. So you have these things on record. That's the most important thing. So you have a pattern to show this happened, and this happened, and XYZ actions were taken. And if those actions are not effective, you can go back to your school and say, hey, you have all these incidents that happened to me and my friends and other members of the Jewish community, even faculty perhaps, and it's clear why the situation is exacerbating on campus, because the actions that you've taken are not meaningful ones or not effective, or it's just pure lip service.
Right.
And I think that having a track record is super important, whether you pursue litigation or not. And it's really to show, I think, in an educational way as well, what can be done in the future, so we learn from the mistakes of the actions that we're taking.
Do you feel that things are getting better on campus because students are understanding that they do have rights, and they are now that more people have stepped forward and are taking action, do you feel that things are improving?
Yeah, I would also say, just tagging off of that point, any student who goes into college, whether you're Jewish or not Jewish, know your rights in your state and from your student code of conduct, and frankly in the country that you're in. I mean, whether this shows in Europe, they should know the laws of, let's say, the UK.
Great point.
Yeah, whether France or whatever. So I would say that yes, things are safety-wise absolutely better.
Great.
But what I will say is that the bar for what is unacceptable has been raised, because you had the encampments in the spring of 2024. So anything that's less bad than that is okay, right? And it's easy to cover up. So let's say you have a faculty member in a classroom who's spewing lies about Israel and erasing Jewish history, because that's not a public safety threat. that's not really perceived as much of a problem because the encampment was just so terrible. But what people don't realize is that those professors are, and the administration who fails to hold them accountable, of course, are ground zero for the encampment. That's where it all starts. That's the breeding ground for what I like to call, and I've called many times, the pipeline of hate. And if these professors, and I think rightfully so, now that Columbia's, let's say, Middle Eastern Studies department is being put under review, I think many other universities' Middle Eastern Studies department and perhaps other departments that are biased leaning one way, or there's showing evidence of anti-Semitic bias, and I know in K through 12 it's a huge problem too, there should be
a huge problem.
A review to ensure that this indoctrination does not continue, because ultimately academic freedom does not cover or protect indoctrination and harassment. And honestly, that's what's going on today in a lot of classrooms.
Agreed. And I'm so grateful for you and for, I mean, we've worked with so many incredible students with Eden, Yagadar, Columbia, and Shabbos Kestenbaum, and Eyal Yacobi, and the list goes on and on. I'm so proud of you, first of all, of your generation, for standing up, for speaking up. I'm sad that your college education had to be turned into, this fight. And unfortunately, it's just unfortunate. But I am very, very grateful, and I'm hopeful that this generation, the way that you're sticking up for yourselves, for Jews, and for Americans, will really help us, and that we're headed in the right direction. I have to continue to be hopeful that this will get better. And again, it's not going to happen on our own. So I hope others are motivated to speak up and to take action the way you have. And again, the way you have, or in smaller ways as well. So I am really excited to hear more from you. I could speak to you all day long, but we do have to go and move on. But I'm really excited for tonight's panel after the screening of The Blind Spot, where you can share a little bit more about yourself and about your insight. And I just want to say thank you again for all that you're doing. Thank you for joining us here today. It's been an honor and a privilege to have you. And thank you to our listeners for logging into this episode of Unmasked, Unfiltered, and Unapologetic, HMTV. I really appreciate Sabrina Soffer for being here and joining us today and sharing her insights. Be sure to subscribe, share, and stay connected to more engaging conversations. And until next time, take care.